Hey folks, Steve here with another World in Flames video covering land warfare. This is part 2 in a series. If you'd like to see part 1, there's another video on my channel where we cover land warfare basics and supply. This video will be focusing on the interaction of armor units and how to perform blitz combat and what are the uses of blitz combat. We will then look at how offensive points work and how they're used in land warfare. So should be pretty good stuff here. One correction from my last video that I sort of implied but I didn't really address explicitly enough is that when you're tracing supply, thanks to Pete who pointed this out in the comments. Again, I should have made this clear in the video, and I didn't make it clear enough. When you're tracing your supply path from a unit to a secondary supply source, that is always going to be a basic supply path, so you're always going to be counting the hexes. You're only really going to use that railway supply hex path via the rail lines. That's only going to come into play when a secondary supply source is tracing back to that home city. So for instance, if this unit was, we'll say down here, and the Zocs were fine, this unit could not use the rail path to trace supply to the HQ unit here. I'll zoom in a little bit just to help with. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hexes away, he's out of supply. This unit cannot use the rail path to count back to the HQ unit. But the HQ unit can trace via the unlimited rail line hexes back to German territory, to a German city for its railway supply path. So just something to sort of keep in mind. I didn't explain that clearly. I sort of implied it with the whole trident metaphor, but just to be clear, that's how that works. So now that that's out of the way, let's talk about actual blitz combat. So again, in this video, just like the last video, I'm going to be talking about the game in terms of the 2d10 combat table instead of the 1d10 combat table. Ultimately, I think the 2d10 combat table is better, but I'm also used to it, so I'm probably biased. But I'm going to bring that on the screen here, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about it so you can understand the importance of it. So when you're looking at combat here in World in Flames, there are two different combat result tables. There's the assault table, and there's the blitz table. Now, I'll say a lot of the time you're going to be using the assault table, and that's sort of the default. However, dependent on the terrain that's being attacked in combat, the defender can choose which table to use. Now, if you're on the offensive and you're attacking and you've got armor and you've got all these other things that are really good for smashing into your enemy, as the attacker, you probably want the blitz table. But there are circumstances where a defender, if the defender gets to pick the combat table, then they may actually choose the blitz table. And you might ask why that is. Well, if you look at the results on here, what you'll start to notice just looking at the possible results from -1 onward is that the blitz table tends to have less casualties for units, really for both sides even. So by comparison here, while the 10 result is the same, 1 loss to the attacker, if you get down to, say, 17, which isn't, that's probably a result that may come up fairly often, with just the average die roll of 2d10 plus, a lump sum of modifiers. A 17 on the assault table is going to be a 1 loss for each side, and the attacker flips. But in the blitz table, the units actually retreat. And so if you're the defender, and you're maybe limited in your ability to replace your losses, or it's a logistical challenge to get new units in to protect that territory, you may actually want the attacker to be rolling on the blitz table because it's going to allow you to retreat, or a greater likelihood of retreating than losing your units. And that's a defender choice. The player aid sheet actually helps you understand how the choosing of the combat column takes place. This happens in the land combat step when you're calculating for the battle. And so if you just read here, provided, it's a little hard to read, so I'll read it out loud. Provided the defender is in a non-city hex that is clear, forest, or desert, then the attacker has the choice of column, assuming, and it doesn't say assuming, but I'm interpreting the information here. If A, more armor headquarters, that's what HQA is, an armored headquarter unit, and or armor units than the defender, they have more of those units in the attack than the defender, or more mechanized units than the defender, and the defender has no armored headquarters or armor. So in those cases where the terrain allows it, so clear, which is obviously good for armored units, forest, which turned out to not be a deterrent to armor in the war, and then desert, which is also flat and easy for those units to function. If they have a greater number of those units in the combat, then the attacker gets to pick. And obviously, if the attacker deems it so, they're going to want to use that Blitz column, and I'll explain part of the reason why they'll want to do that here in a second, and that it does have to do with the results on the chart here. But in order to do that, so you have to figure, if the defender has no armor units, then you could possibly do a Blitz with a mechanized unit. And an example of a mechanized unit is this German unit here on the blow up, the one on the right. It has the oval with the infantry X in the NATO symbol, so that is a mechanized infantry. So a mechanized infantry, if you're attacking, maybe say here, and in this hex, sorry, it's a little hard to see, in this hex, there are no mechanized or armor units. If this stack of German units attacked here, technically, the Germans would have more mechanized unit than the defender has mechanized units, and the defender has no armor units, so then in that attack, the German player would get to use the Blitz table. Mechanized units are not motorized units in terms of the type of unit. They do use motorized movement, I guess. I didn't get into that in the last video, so I may cover it here in a little bit, but over here, this unit on the right with the little wheels underneath the NATO, that's how I see them, underneath the NATO symbol, the two dots are motorized infantry. That is not mechanized infantry, and so these units are not going to be used as a determining factor for Blitz combat, though they are useful because they tend to have higher movement rate than your non-motorized infantry. So again, if we go back here, then this would be a Blitz combat. And then again, if the enemy does have armor present, so I'm going to swap these stacks for a second. So here, if this stack was attacking this stack, the defender would get to pick what the table is, because as we see down below these cases, otherwise it's the defender's choice to pick the table. So again, unless you're dealing with these mechanized or mechanized or armor units, the defender's going to pick. So would they rather have retreats, or would they rather have higher casualties in the assault? So here, if this stack was attacking here, which would probably be a very foolish attack, by the way, but let's just say for the instance that we were going to look at it. So the attacker only has mechanized, but the defender does have armor. So the case B doesn't fit. And if we look at A, obviously this stack doesn't have any armor attacking a stack that does have armor. So for sure, the defender is going to get to pick the table, whatever they feel is best, depending on what the attacker's bonuses might end up being. Now down below here, we have some German armor, and by comparison, if this stack attacked this stack has no armor at all. And so this would be a case where the German does have more, it's case A, more armor than the defender, and so they would get to pick the table. If they attacked down here, they would still get to pick the table, because if you look at the case, armor trumps mechanized here. So even though the Russians have some mechanized units here, what matters is that there's armor present and the attacker has more armor, period. Then they'd get the pick the table in this attack. And if the situation was instead this stack was attacking this stack by itself, or even with these guys here, what matters is because there's armor present, that mechanized might as well not be there, and the attacker does not have more armor than the defender. They have the same number of armor units, and so in this case, the defender will get to pick the table. Now, you can imagine, and just in terms of long-term big strategy, when it comes to the Blitz combat, you're going to be, if you're the attacker, I'm going to put our minds in the frame of the attacker, obviously, especially on the Eastern Front, I'm going to move this out of the way for a second to show, when you're fighting on the Eastern Front, you're going to have a lot of this nice wide open space to make use of the Blitz tactics, and if you, as the Germans, have allocated enough of your armor and mechanized units, you see there's a lot of clear here, a lot of forest, and those are all going to be opportunities for the attacker to pick that table and make use of it. In the north, that's still the case for a lot of it, but you'll run into these swamp hexes that will kind of slow things down. Leningrad is in a swamp hex. And so this whole area gets kind of broken up by that. Not that you can't kind of snake some armor up through this way, through the forest and through the terrain here. It's just you're going to have a lot easier time doing it. And this kind of plays into the next part of that Blitz, the purpose of the Blitz combat. So if you look here, just to point out, when you're attacking and you've got your Blitz column, if you've got some armor mech or your armor headquarters attacking, you're going to get a +1 to your die roll, depending on terrain here. See, attacking non-city clear or desert hex, not across the fort hex side, you get a +1 per those units. So even in the cases where, you know, maybe if the defender has chosen the Blitz table, but you have any of these units, you're still going to get that bonus. But if you're attacking with infantry and the defender has allowed it to be a Blitz because they want retreats, you're not going to get your +1 when you're attacking. So something to keep in mind there. But the whole real trick of the Blitz combat, why it really matters, is that when you look on here, you get these blitzes, blah, blah, blah. You get down to the R's, right? So an R result here on the key says retreat, remaining defending land units, destroy land units that cannot retreat. So they're going to, get pushed back. You're advancing your line. That's great. That's wonderful. On the combat results table, there's another result that is not on the Blitz table, but it is the S table. And that's destroy land units that cannot retreat, and place remaining defending land units on the production circle to arrive as reinforcements on the next turn. That S is standing for shatter. So you shattered the units. If you're in the assault combat table and you get a shatter, these units aren't necessarily destroyed, but they're going to be removed from the map, and that's going to be nice because you're going to advance into combat, and potentially now there's a hole in the line that you could look to try to exploit. But that's still not super fast, and it's not blitzkrieg warfare. What you really want is, again, on the Blitz table, you want to get these nice B results down here. So 19 and above, you're going to get some level of B result. The colors here actually denote how units are flipped after combat, and so this is kind of important to keep in mind that if the result is a white result, that means that the attacker is going to flip all the units that conducted that attack, assuming that the defender took less losses, and typically, or the same. If the attacker took the same or greater losses than the defender, then they're going to flip everything. I'm pretty sure that's indicative here on the combat chart, but make sure I'm reading that right. It's very. Last time I played this, it was a few weeks ago or months ago, so I'm trying to jog my memory here. So you can see here, if it's a yellow result, and it's going to have this little cross symbol, but the yellow result says half the remaining attacking land units may stay face up. If it's green, then all the remaining all the land units that are left after combat stay face up. And so The orange just ends up providing an extra loss to the attacker if you're attacking what would be sort of like a fortified area, like a city, a mountain, um, tough terrain, and so that can sometimes be a determining factor for making it harder for the attacker, I guess. So keep an eye out for these orange results. They do come up pretty often. But if you're just looking again at the yellow and the green, as the attacker, you want green because you want all of your units face up. If you have yellow results and half the attacking units flip, what that means is that they either need to be reorganized by an HQ unit and flip them back during the turn, or they have to wait to be flipped at the end of the turn. And so you can imagine if you get a yellow result early in June, in your June turn, May June, 1941 is the Germans, you're going to have to use your HQ to flip them back, and that's sort of like utilizing resources you don't want to spend. You want these nice green results so they can keep going, because once a unit's flipped, until it's become flipped back to its right side up position, it can't attack or move or do anything. So, if we attacked, this hex, and okay, well, one of these guys has to flip, well, we'll probably flip the non-mechanized unit, but now this unit, even if it advanced, is all by itself and it left some guys behind. So you kind of have to be thinking about, where can you get the most bonuses so that you can ensure or have a very high likelihood of getting that green result. Because even getting these bees with the yellow, which I haven't described the bees yet, but even getting a yellow bee can sometimes be dangerous because you may not want to advance. It might not be as useful as you think, because you may not want to advance if a lot of your forces all of a sudden are now flipped, and you can't project more force into your breakthrough. So that is what the B stands for, by the way. It is a breakthrough. And so what a B result is going to do is it's going to do an S result. So whatever other units that weren't eliminated in combat are going to be shattered, removed from the board, and then you get the breakthrough. So what is a breakthrough in game terms? So your normal advance after combat is, typically one hex, you move up, whatever, and if we were doing, let's see if I have that's fine. So, you're going to knock out a unit, and you advance after combat, great. You move into the vacated hex. However, if you read the advance after combat rules in the combat section of the rulebook, they don't really define it here, I don't think, which I think it's kind of a bummer. They should really, there's enough white space here that they can explain what a breakthrough is, but they don't, so you have to look at it in the rulebook. If the result of your combat includes a B result, and the defender's hex only costs 1 movement point, modified by whether to enter, you may advance attacking HQ armor and mechanized units a second hex. So, what that really means is a clear hex, and I'm going to have to find, hopefully I can, it's going to be on one of the maps, and thus it's going to be hard to find. Give me the terrain. Of course. Alright, that's annoying. Is it over here? No, it's on the Pacific map, and I don't have the Pacific map loaded. Okay, apologies. I am just going to say that a clear hex here, right, that's 1 movement point cost. Most of these clear hexes in general are going to be 1 movement point cost, not a big deal. So when you get a B result here, let's say B result here, these guys are gone, let's say. We advance after combat, and let me see how I want to do this. I don't really have this position where it makes the most logical tactical sense to move this way, so I need to think about this for a second. Okay, it's fine. I'll just do it and we'll discuss it. Okay, so I have shattered these units, I got my breakthrough. So my units are going to advance after combat. Cool. And then what I'm going to have happen is I'm going to, if I do my check here, I advanced after combat, great. And if the result includes a B result, which it did, and the defender's hex only costs 1 movement point, which it was, this is a 1 movement point hex. And assuming it's clear weather, because if the weather made it cost double, then I can't, which just means you're not going to be blitzing in rainy or stormy weather, obviously, right? You may advance attacking armor, HQs, armor, and mech a second hex, so we're going to go ahead and do that. We're going to advance here, right? So far, so good. And then if I had another attack this turn, go away. I am going to attack here. Let's say I blew these guys away. I'm going to advance after combat, and then I'm going to, because this was a clear hex, I'm going to have my mechanized unit go here. So that extra hex actually counts for a lot, and probably what I would have done first, if I was planning this right, and I'm just running off the cuff, I probably would have my HQ unit over here. And the reason why I would do that is that now, after my combat phase is complete, and you know, I wouldn't care about supply in any other circumstance, but now you can kind of see, maybe I would move them up here even. 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah. Okay, so if you look here, this unit would be out of supply, and technically so would have this unit if I had left my HQ back here, because this unit would have been projecting a zone of control. But now we've got it cut out of supply, and so we've got, you know, a Russian armor unit. We're fine for supply because we can count through these friendly hexes. 1, 2, 3, 4. So they're good to go from this HQ unit for its basic supply. The HQ unit's on a rail line that can go back to Germany. And 1, 2, 3, 4. These units are still in supply down here, and you know, we could potentially go away. We could potentially look at you know, this unit. These units are now basically useless unless these units can somehow you know, sort of come back, maybe attack this unit and restore supply. I don't think I have an HQ unit over here, which for demonstration purposes would have been maybe better, but you can kind of see what I'm talking about here with the breakthrough, right? It gets you that extra hex to advance, and what you can typically do, because you may have multiple combats in your combat phase, is that the ability to sort of close the door or even project Zocs can cut units out of supply. Now, if we had only moved here, we are still cutting this unit here out of supply, but that supply could potentially be restored if these guys slid down, and maybe from there this unit could count, you know, 1, 2, and so on out of, you know, out of here. But then the challenge for the Russians are going to be, well, if you move here, then the Germans, you know, now that these guys have been cut out of supply, are simply going to, you know, maneuver like this, and now it's the same sort of problem. So I don't have enough units for it to be a true front line here in a Barbarossa scenario, but you're going to find the situation is going to be that the Russians are going to have a hard time escaping these Zocs as the armor kind of comes through here, does the breakthrough, they're in behind your lines, they're projecting Zocs, and your units just have nowhere to go. But that's a big part of the fun, right, when you're playing this game, and if you're playing as the Germans in 41 or you're playing as the Russians in 44, the ability to kind of cut your way through this territory with the Blitz table and the breakthroughs. It will be fun. Now, there's one special caveat to all of this that you need to keep in mind, is that this is all well and good for the European hexes, right? So when you look at the movement cost table, which I unfortunately can't seem to pull up because it's hidden away on another chart somewhere. Maybe I can find... Maybe I have... I really would like to show this so that you can see. No. Sorry, I wanna make sure I can show you guys. It's not gonna be on here, which is a damn shame. Dang it. Sorry, guys. Oh, they need the terrain. The terrain table is just in the most inconvenient location. It's on the Pacific map, which is one annoying thing. But if you looked at it, what you would find is that on the European map, clear hexes are one movement, right? One movement cost. So the whole thing with the breakthrough, where the defender's hex only costs one movement point, you may advance a second hex. You really can't do that on the Pacific and Asia maps. The Asia Pacific maps, even a clear hex, I believe costs, might be two or more movement. And so when you look at doing the same type of maneuvers on the Asia Pacific map, while you can have armor and mechanized units in, say, like China is really where you're probably more likely to be trying to do a breakthrough, you're not going to be able to actually make use of the breakthrough B result the same way you would on the European hex map because of the movement cost difference. None of the Asia Pacific map hexes are going to qualify for that one movement cost defender hex, rule to advance your armor a second hex. And I was able to catch my Japanese opponent when I was playing in person some months ago in China, where he attacked with some armor. It blew out my units, and he was going to advance a second hex, and I was quick to remind him that he actually can't, because those hexes, even a clear hex in China, is 2 movement points. So the difference there, if you're trying to understand, well, then why would I ever even bother with those units in the Pacific, is that having those armor units still allow you to get the Blitz table, and that Blitz table still allows you to shatter units. It still allows you to force retreats out of there. And so while you're not getting a second hex, because those hexes again represent a larger amount of territory than on the European map, projecting force with your mechanized and armor units as the Japanese or whomever, it will still be valuable because you can get these bonuses to attack, you can get retreats to take more territory, you can get the breakthroughs to shatter. All of that is still useful on that map. It's just you're not getting that extra encirclement that's going to take place. So, not maybe quite as fun cutting people out of supply, but the China is a whole interesting theater in and of itself. So we'll save that for another time. So I think I've covered for the most part the blitz mechanics in the game, at least pretty well. Again, it's pretty straightforward. A lot of World War II strategy games have some level of breakthrough type mechanics, and I think the breakthrough mechanics here in World in Flames is pretty straightforward. It makes sense, and you're probably not going to see really huge, gigantic encirclements, at least until you've made some major breakthroughs where the Russians, due to Zox, just can't get around and escape, and then you might have a nice big pocket that runs along through here, and a bunch of units are stuck. It can happen. It's just not as dramatic as you might think. You're probably going to find a lot of these immediate encirclements and taking down of units this way. Okay, so let's now talk about offensive points. So if you want to follow along in the rules, this is section 16 of the rules. Offensive points are actually an option. So if you're just playing the classic game, so no divisions and all this other stuff, you're not going to deal with O points. But O points are essentially a way to represent the dedication of resources, planning, and time, ammunition, and so on, to some major offensive. So the idea being, any other combat you're making are just sort of, I guess, standard warfare. But when you're spending offensive points, or as they're sometimes just called, O points or O chits, that represents a major offensive where you're seeking to make dramatic change to the current state of that front line, wherever it happens to be. So if we take a look at the rules for that, you can follow along with your rulebook or check out the PDF on the ADG website. They have the latest PDF of the rules that you can check out. A couple of things about it. So they are built in multiples of 5 called O-chits. Each O-chit costs build points equal to the chit's point. So a 5-point chit costs 5 build points, 10-point chit costs 10 build points, and takes 2 turns to build. You can also pay double value to get it a turn sooner. And they will, purchased O-chits are going to go in the production circle and they'll arrive as reinforcements. I'll just say right away that offensive points are going to be something that you want to be very careful about because they're kind of expensive. They're something that you build and you use, but a lot of the time you're probably not going to find that you have enough production bandwidth to just drop 10 build points on these offensive points. I mean, it's very hard to, because if you're not building these, rather, instead of building these, you probably want to be building more units, is some of that cost-benefit kind of thing. But they become critical, and the funny thing is, a country or power like the US, who has such a huge amount of production, can actually stand to benefit from just purchasing a ton of offensive points, and I've been told by some folks that's what they do with their US, is that they're churning out O points, and they're able to use them for these huge offensives late in the war that obviously the Axis just can't stand up to. So what can an offensive point do for you? Well, each major power may spend those offensive points to call multiple impulse types at once. So when you're playing the game, I haven't really talked to just these standard game turn mechanics in my videos, but some of this is just basic rulebook reading stuff that seems superfluous for me to read through. A power is going to choose the type of impulse that it's going to take. So it might take a land impulse, in which case it's going to move and utilize mostly land units. It might take a naval impulse, in which case it's going to be activating and moving naval units, or it could take an air impulse and move a lot of air units for a big air campaign. And because an impulse is, you're going to get multiple impulses in a turn, you might do an air impulse and then follow it up with a land impulse, or vice versa, or something like that. So what you could do is you can spend O points to actually do multiple types at once. So you could combine a naval and an air, or an air and a land, or something like that. That can be very powerful. And then you can use them to provide, quote unquote, I'm putting the quotes here, benefits to one of your HQs, and we're going to dig deeper into that because that's really what I wanted to cover in this video. You can also use them to reorganize one of your HQs. So the way that works is, if we had a case where, I'm going to reset time a little bit here. We had, this unit here that had to flip, or maybe we had an attack that really failed and both of these units are flipped. What we can do in response to that is we can say, okay, well, I'm going to flip the HQ, and that will enable me to reorganize these units, and they can flip back, which is great. But now I've got this HQ unit that's flipped and is now useless until the end of the turn, except if I have some offensive points, I can actually spend them to flip the unit back, and I can keep this theater, this flank going by reorganizing units and attack, reorganize, attack. And then one of the other things you can do is purchase extra actions during any impulse other than pass. That's just allowing you to do more actions than what your activity limits would normally allow a power to do on a land segment, on a naval land impulse, or a naval impulse. You're just getting more actions, right? So let's see here. I'm just gonna focus on the HQ benefits part because that's really what I wanted to cover in this video, and it's probably the most important one when it comes to land warfare besides the reorganization mechanic that I just described. So you can actually do HQ benefits for naval actions and air actions. and just I'll cover very briefly how this is supposed to work. So when you decide you're going to do HQ benefits, only one headquarters may be chosen to provide benefits, and only to one action type, this impulse, even if you have chosen multiple actions. And the cost is 5 plus twice the reorg value of the HQ. And this is sort of a thing where like some HQs are simply better because this middle value in the parentheses is higher, but it also means that if you're going to use them for benefits, they're more expensive to activate. So if we looked at this, 5 plus twice the value, so 5 plus 2 times 2 is 4, so 9, it would cost 9 offensive points to have von Lieb provide HQ benefits. An HQ may only provide benefits to units while it's face up, obviously. It may move and fight and or reorganize units normally during the impulse. It provides benefits, so you typically want to combine that, so where you're using these benefits to enhance units and then also reorganize them if they have to flip from combat. And then when you're providing those benefits, the units that you're providing those benefits to have to be within range of that HQ, and the range is the chosen HQ's reorg value in hexes. So we could only provide benefits to units that are within 2 hexes of this HQ unit here. So 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2. I couldn't get down here to this guy, but I could get these benefits to these 4 hexes, which would be important. If you're going to do this during a naval action, that means you're going to use these O points to support naval activities. And really, but what it's going to allow you to do is when you spend the O points, it's going to allow your ships to do better searching. Now, I don't know how valuable that really is. Obviously, if you're talking about the Pacific War and you have HQ units that are in a port, and that's where they're going to kind of need to be. They're going to need to be in a port. They could provide these the reorg value. Yeah, I've never used them this way, and I just don't know how valuable it is. But basically, what it's doing is that it allows you to use the points to enhance your search rolls, demand a reroll. So if you're trying to get naval combat going and you fail your search roll, you can burn off some of these points that have been used to re-roll and try again if you don't like what you rolled. But I don't know. I don't have experience using it, so I don't want to comment much on it, other than that's how you would use it for naval actions, and obviously the HQ units like Nimitz in the Pacific are going to be doing that sometimes. Maybe this is how you would potentially get some really good die rolls for a Battle of Midway or something like that. If you were to do the benefits in an air action, what you're going to do is all aircraft controlled by your major power get to roll an extra die for ground strikes. And they also double their bombing factors for any other air mission they conduct, as long as that's within the range of the HQ. And then there's some benefits to reorg. So, it can make your aircraft perform basically twice as good for their air missions by getting that extra die roll attempt or doubling of their factors. And then finally, for land actions, and this is probably, in my mind, where you're going to be spending a lot of your offensive points. So what you do is, at the start of your land action, when you specify your HQ to provide benefits, you're going to double the land factor, double the land combat factors, or bombardment factors if it's a artillery, factors of cooperating land units within range of the HQ when you declare an overrun or a land combat, or if you're bombarding with your artillery, if you're playing with divisions. You can do this in total to as many of your units as twice the reorg value, and you may enhance the same unit in a land attack in one or more overruns, but it counts against the total each time. So, to demonstrate what that really looks like, if we were doing that with von Lieb, we have these 4 hexes that we could power up. I like to think of it as like a power up attack or something. But again, you're enhancing these units with extra resources, supplies, ammunitions, and additional tactical planning. So if I think about it, I say, well, if I get to double 4 units, because 2 times 2 is 4, I get to double 4 units. Which ones are going to be the most valuable to double? Where am I going to get the most gain? So I'm going to probably double that armor, so the 7 becomes a 14. I'll probably double these 2 units, so that 6 plus 6 is 12. We double that to 24. And then we'll do one of these 5s, so that becomes a 10. So, and if we were all attacking, let's say, this hex, I'm gonna use this up here to kind of help demonstrate the value. So if we were attacking this hex with these 3 hexes, right, without the HQ benefit, it would be 10 combat factors in the top hex, it would be 12 in the middle hex, and then that would be 11 in the bottom hex, right? So that gives us 33 versus a defending amount of 10, which equals 3-to-1 odds, which is a +6 to the die roll, right? That's pretty good, right? I mean, that's a pretty decent roll. Might go poorly on us, but if we power it up like we wanted to, right? We'd say, well, we're going to double that armor unit, so it becomes 14 plus 4. Actually, let's start from top to bottom. So we're going to double one of these units, so that becomes 15 in the top. We're going to double both of these units, so that becomes 24 in the middle, and then we're going to double the armor in this hex, so 14, that's 18 in the bottom hex. And so, let's see, that's 39, 40, 57, if I can do elementary school math correctly. Versus it's still 10 is equal to, it's almost 6-to-1 odds, but not quite. And depending on, I want to show you, let's see, so 5, there's a whole thing about fractional odds, but that's another option that I don't really want to get into. So we'll just say, for the sake of this, that it's 5-to-1. If I had jostled around some units, I might have been able to get that extra combat factors to get to 6-to-1. We'll say 5-to-1 odds, and then that becomes a +10. And, so by utilizing O points, and we had to spend 9 O points, so 9 production, we were able to inflate our bonus from a +6 to a +10. And I don't know why I closed that, because, hey, if you look at this, right, now we're probably going to end up on the assault table, but if you look at let's say an average die roll on 2d10 is probably somewhere between 10 and 12, right? That's how the standard distribution works out. 10 to 12 plus 6, and assuming there are no other modifiers for a second, just for the purposes of me explaining this, so plus 6 is going to give us between 16 and 18 on average. You can see that's not great. We would have to roll better than average, and then we'd get some decent rolls, but the average is not great. And then even, I mean, it's okay, but not great. And then if we rolled poorly, and let's say we got a 2, the worst result, 2 plus 6 is an 8, we'd lose a lot of units. So it's all right, right? But if we did plus 10, okay, well, what's the lowest we could roll? Well, 2 plus 10 is 12. 12 isn't great. We might lose something if we were attacking a city, mountain, forest, jungle, blah, 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 blah. If we rolled average, so 10 to 12 plus 10 puts us in a automatically better for us than the defender set of ranges here. And then obviously even rolling slightly better than average will put us above the chart. So we're going to get no units flipped. We're going to get 2 enemies destroyed. Shatter result, the best you can get. So even an average die roll is going to give us better odds and better losses to the for us against the defender. So you can see that plus 4 actually makes a big difference over the plus 10 versus the plus 6 actually makes a pretty big difference in terms of what are the potential results that you're going to get. And so it becomes part of your strategy to figure out, like, when do I want to use my O points? Where is it going to be really critical? What's going to allow me to attack? And if you imagine, you're going to combine this with, you may combine this with a lot of armor, and you're going to do a lot of breakthroughs. You're going to guarantee those breakthroughs by having combat powers doubled. It can go really well. And keep in mind that they don't even necessarily all have to be in the same combat. So if we doubled units, we could have had doubled it here, and now it's 15 against 3, which would be 5-to-1 odds in this attack. If we did a double here, it'd be 24 against 10, which is only, I guess that's 2-to-1 odds. So a plus 4. And then, well, I guess these guys could attack down here. So 18 to 5. Yeah. 18 to 10 is really what that would be. We probably wouldn't make that attack, but what you could do is you could spread that doubling to units across multiple combats to give you an extra edge if you really wanted to make a lot of gains all at once along the line, or you could power up units all to attack the same couple of hexes to concentrate that firepower on maybe some critical spot where you can get a really good breakthrough, or something like that. It's going to depend on how you want to play it, what the game situation is. Kind of hard to say all the way back here. So that's going to be the main way that you do HQs, but again, otherwise you're going to be doing multiple actions. There's a chart in the rulebook that shows the cost for getting multiple actions for depending on what power you are. So for example, this is in 16.2 of the rulebook. If Germany wants to if they're doing a land action and they'd like to also do an air action, it's going to cost them 5 offensive points. So maybe not terribly expensive, but something to keep in mind. So you end up, when you add in this option, again, it's an option. You don't have to play with O points. But if you're going to, what it's going to enable you to do is do a lot more stuff in different ways. So it's like a flexibility option, and adding some more dramatic combats that could take place when they are powering up units, whether that means it's, maybe a player is going to choose to open up their Operation Barbarossa with an air action, and they're going to do it with a super-powered air action by doubling a lot of those air units, or some of those air units. And so then when you launch that campaign to hit all the Russian aircraft, they're going to get multiple rolls to flip everything. Or maybe with Operation Barbarossa, this is Germans versus the Soviets is a great example to explain land warfare, because that's really the biggest part of the land warfare in the game, obviously being World War II. Maybe you open up Barbarossa with a land action, but you also spend those O points to do an air action at the same time, so you can launch a huge amount of ground strikes along with all of your attacks. So there's just a lot of different ways that you can approach it. Different powers are probably going to want to spend those O points a little bit differently, and if you're really going to focus on those O points, you need to be thinking about when you're going to build them and how often you're going to build them, because again, you're going to be trying to spend your build points on other things as well, building units, replacing units, and so on, that finding the budget to build them will be tough. And some factions at the start of your scenario, depending on the scenario you're playing, start with some, but then you have to really decide where it makes sense to do it. If the Germans are having trouble collapsing France, because the French player is very astute at defense and is able to delay the surrender, if the Germans have to spend O points taking down France, that's going to be less O points they have to take on Russia later, other than, the Germans are now going to have to dedicate more of their production on replacing those O points they just spent. So that becomes a part of the strategy as well, if you're using the option of how am I going to build them, how am I going to use them, where will they be most effective for me. Okay, well, I think that covers everything I wanted to talk to about O points. I recommend looking at the rules for this and checking things out. If I take a look at the other potential things I could talk about for land warfare, I think a lot of it's very situational. So we did talk about Zox, we talked about supply, we talked about stacking. We did talk a little bit about weather and how that impacts supply. A lot of that's straightforward. Winter attacking is not great. Let me think if there's anything that really sticks out. I think if you're new to World in Flames and you're just trying to understand how all of this works, I think that this video has covered the majority of it. There's no better way to learn the game other than busting out the game and working your way through it. But what I hope these videos can do for you is, as you're reading the rulebook, you're reading about these different concepts, or the rulebook's trying to dictate something to you, and it might not be immediately clear what they mean. That these videos with the demonstrations that I'm providing can help provide that context so that you can better apply the rules. So when you're reading the rules and it talks about something, you say, "Oh yeah, Steve did that. I know what that looks like. That makes sense." That's really the goal here. But nothing can replace you playing the game yourself and really reading the rules and absorbing everything here. There's a lot more I guess I could cover with the deluxe edition stuff, with different types of units, but a lot of that starts getting into the weeds, and so I may save that for another video. Not sure when that could be. It's just going to depend on what people want to see. So if there's something that I've not covered yet for land warfare, or units, or something that you'd like me to cover that I haven't covered, let me know in the comments section, or send me a message or something. I can look at organizing another video around those areas of concern. I could probably think of some more nebulous concepts to cover, like U.S. entry maybe here in the future, or maybe a whole video dedicated to production. That might be worth looking at here for new players. The thing I would recommend anyone looking to play World in Flames is, especially if you're new, is just take your time. This is a game that is going to take many sessions over a long period of real time to play. And as much as you may be playing with folks that want to really try to get stuff done because they want to get as much game in each session as you play, I think it's important that you have that opportunity to really absorb the mechanics and absorb the way the game works, so that you have a better experience overall, rather than being rushed through a game experience and just not really knowing what you're doing and why, or tripping over some of the more nuanced aspects of the game. So in review again, just to cover everything here, Blitz mechanics, everything around your armor and mechanized units, they're going to get you that extra distance. That way you can create encirclements, cut units out of supply. You want to be doing that in the logical places, nice flat open terrain with small movement cost values, so you can get your units through. HQ units are always going to be a linchpin for you, both in terms of supply, but also in using offensive points to enhance your attacks along a front line, enhancing your ability to make attacks by doubling combat factors, or enhancing your aircraft, or even helping your naval units do searches if that HQ is in a port. And that kind of hits the really broad strokes of land warfare in the last video and in this one. So again, if there's something else that folks would like to see, let me know. Otherwise, I'll maybe look to tackle some other topics here in the future. So thank you for watching. If you like this video, hit like. If you'd like to see more content like this, hit subscribe. I do instructional videos for World in Flames and its companion games. I may do instructional videos for other games in the future. I do reviews and unboxings, those sorts of things. Hopefully some good content that folks appreciate. And until next time, take care, and we'll catch you later.